there's still so much opportunity once you're in a pause. And I think the thing that has gotten terrible publicity is that your interests are going to die in motherhood, that your goals are going to die in motherhood, and that your network's going to die. And actually, there is a strategic way of mitigating the risk to your next career or returning, but also in a very deep and profound way to have, now that you've checked the ego in the door, to open yourself up to new opportunities and experiences.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into Things No One Tells You, or, T-Naughty, as we call it around here. This is an episode that we thought it was a great time of year to sort of reflect and take it back to an episode we did really early on, because it just feels like a time for family, for thinking about what's ahead for the new year, for resetting. And this is one of our favorites with Neha Ruch, the author of The Power Pause. Neha is an advocate for women who are strategically choosing to take a pause to raise their kids at some point in their career. And what I loved so much about Neha is that Neha is so clear with her specific instructions and her blueprint for how you can handle and navigate this part of life if you choose to do that. But the other thing is, I love that Neha is trying to reframe this conversation of not only, hey, if you have a career that you love, if you feel this calling to take time to just be with your kids, you do not have to make the pause forever. You can do that with the intention and the confidence and the comfort of knowing that you can come back on the other side even better. And I can't say enough about her book or her as a person, but I can't wait for you to watch this episode. I hope you learn as much from this conversation as I did. This is Neha Ruch on The Power of the Power Pause. I am so excited to introduce all of you, if you don't know her already, to Neha Ruch. Neha, thank you so much for joining me. I just have to share out of the gate that when I heard about The Power Pause, your book, and when I read more about Mother Untitled, it was like this magnetic force pulling me to it for so many different reasons. Because I just love what you're doing, the narrative of working women taking a pause with the intention of coming back even better on the other side. Welcome. And how are you? And let's just start with, where are you right now?
Oh, well, thank you. You'll appreciate that I am at home. My two kids, our babysitter just arrived. Obviously, the kids are off of school because why not? And I'm coming off of the last few months where I had the privilege to get to see this book out into the world. And it's been a really interesting moment for me to figure out how to continue this work while making it sustainable, because I still want more time with my kids.
So, and that's really what the basis of this is founded on, right? And I don't want to speak for you, but right, the power pause. How did this come to be? Where did this idea come for you?
Yeah. So I started the work on this actually in 2017. I'd had my child in 2016, New Year's Day. And
Oh.
I know. And he was like, and he's so punctual. So it's very on brand for him. And I was rocking with him in the middle of the night thinking, yeah, I'm sleep deprived. Yes, there's milk everywhere, but I actually finally feel at peace. And I think
Mm.
there's something about that I had been looking for a long time and hadn't found it in my career. And then I chose to initially downshift. So I went to part-time work and eventually would pause. But as soon as I did, I started hearing, are you giving up? Are you going to be bored all day? And did you waste that business school education? And I thought, well, where did this come from? Because A, it's making me feel bad. But B, I'm meeting all these incredible women who, similar to me, have clocked in a decade in their career, have really equitable relationships with their partners. Like, they're not serving these guys cocktails at the end of the day. They are like considering freelance or consulting, or they're like tinkering with a new idea. None of it matches the tropes. And when I looked around, there was such great content around the traditional working parent, right? Like
Mhm.
the lean in movement, the girl boss era. But it seemed to count anyone like myself who was just taking their foot off the gas for a moment to lean into motherhood. It seemed to count us out. So I started this as
Wow.
a small project, and it's obviously grown since.
So what's funny is when you just said that, it actually gave me chills, and the reason is because when Lean In came out, I was all in on. I was like, I met Sheryl Sandberg at this on the sidelines of a Vikings game, and I remember being like, "Oh my god!" And I do believe in that moment it resonated so deeply with me. Like I was at ESPN. I had my daughter in 2016. I had my son in 2014. So we have that timing in common. But it was around that time that I was just like, this is, this is how it's going to be. And I'm going to take them on the road and I've got to figure this out and that. And I was very much in a highly, and still it's a highly competitive field that I'm in. But when I was at ESPN, it was like, I remember being like, I'm just going to take 8 weeks of maternity leave with my first child. I'm like, I don't need more. I don't need more. And I hadn't had a child yet.
Mm,
And I just remember being like, I was so terrified of losing my spot. Not that I felt like it was going to happen maliciously or anything, but I just was, the narrative was you just got to be there and you know how many people are behind you. So it was fascinating to me once I had my son and I was like, oh my God. So when you're describing the rocking and the being in that moment and being surprised and just feeling all the feels of like what motherhood brings, and I know that's a different circumstance for everyone.
mhm.
Um, that really it like speaks to me because I feel like for me, what I've learned is that motherhood has shed a light on for me what is satisfying in the work that I do and what is worth it. Anyway, so the career that you were in before you paused. Can you describe what that was like
Yeah.
for our listeners?
I loved my career and it didn't disappear. And I think that I'm only recently realizing, I graduated college when social media was so nascent. Like Twitter wasn't there yet, right? And
Yeah.
so I got so much of life is luck. And I got, they were like, you're 22, you should probably do this social media research to figure out what people think of, T-Mobile or Chili's. I was in advertising.
Hmm.
And it ended up being the foundation for me to climb the ranks very quickly because no one else was paying attention to social media. And ironically, my first roles were focused on millennial women and mothers, right? Marketing to them, understanding them through the lens of using social media to listen. That was my whole thing. And
Wow.
obviously, I could have never considered how that would eventually lead here. But I ended up, really getting to a place where I was senior in agency land and the politics had outpaced my maturity. Like I was too young to participate in those. So I was feeling like the ick factor from politics. I loved what I did. So I actually went to business school. I got into Stanford and I went to business school because I wanted a train stop to surround myself with smart people and figure
Hmm.
out what came next. And I got what on paper was my dream job. I was like, oh, I'll just go to this like tech company and run brand marketing there. It was marketed towards millennial women. It was a company called Zola. So if you got married in the like 2013, 2014 era, that was like your registry. And on paper, it all made sense, but there was still this feeling of I was like trying to contort myself to fit in the spaces, right? And like prove my value. And so, I think I really loved what I did. And then, but I found that sense of belonging and not having to try so hard. And ironically, I think I looked at Bodhi and thought maybe this is the train stop that I was looking for in business school to surround myself with a different set of people and figure out what came next. So I don't think I stepped into that time with him ever believing like that this was a career ender. So that was sort of the mismatch between my experience with him and what I was hearing.
Wow. And so then what?
Mm. So then I had, I started this. So I was consulting. I was at 2 days a week in office at first, and because I went part time, and then I
Hmm.
had and I started to meet these women and think, well, I want to shine a light on you, like you, Caroline, who wasn't merchandising and just got laid off, and you're freelancing, but you're at home with your kid, or you, her name was Susie K, and she had been at HSBC. She was a banker, and she just didn't want to fly to Hong Kong anymore with a little baby. And she was like, "I've clocked in my 12 years. I know I can go back. I built," and I wanted those stories to be told because that did not match the sort of stay-at-home mom perception of being shut in or having tripped and fallen into motherhood without experience. And I felt like we needed a rebrand of the woman pausing their career so that no one else had to feel like when they paused, they were suddenly this apron clad caricature, because the women I was meeting.
It's life. I love it. It's Coconut. Your dog's name is Coconut. Oh,
Coconut.
I love this. Yes. What
She's
kind of
my
dog?
favorite child. She's the only one who behaves in our house, but, like, this is literally the first time she's barked ever.
What kind is she?
She's a mini Bernedoodle.
Mm,
She's delicious. She, like, really matches our family because she's, like, brown with, like, black hair. It's
I
cute.
love it. I love it. We have a an Irish doodle, and I can't get enough of him. He gives the best hugs,
I know, like, she's, like,
right?
genuinely my, like, parents keep being like, "She's the only one who greets us with so much joy. She's a
It's
grandchild."
like
Like,
things no one tells you about your
there's
pets.
no moods, there's no, she's just there. So I really wanted to profile a bunch of women who upended the tropes about stay-at-home motherhood and show that actually there was no such thing as the black and white idea of stay-at-home and working, and so many of us were existing in between. So I started it as a very small blog and a newsletter, and I sent it to 400 of my contacts,
And
who
were
had.
you highlighting people in the newsletter? Is that how it began?
Correct. And I had a free Squarespace blog, right? Like, 3 posts a week, and that was my goal. That was it. I was going to profile my own experience, sort of overthinking this, because the reality is I did eventually fully pause, and I had my second child, and it was this constant having to work through what it felt like to have to walk into rooms where people would say, "What do you do?"
Oh,
And
yeah.
I would either word vomit on them, or as soon as I said, "I'm home with my kids," I would be like, their eyes would glaze over, or, like, be like, "That's so sweet. I could never do that." I really spent those years, and I'm so glad I had those years building the work alongside having actually paused, even though at the time I would really struggle with, like, looking around and being like, "Oh, that platform's growing so much, and this conversation is so important, but it can't be that big because I'm still choosing to be at home with my kids." And there's an irony of starting the first platform about women pausing when you're on a pause. And yet I'm so glad, because every one of the chapters of the book is having run into an issue and having had to overthink it to come up with the language that I would feel good about.
When you talk about, people asking you about, "What are you doing?" One thing that I love about what you've written is you actually have thought through and give specific examples about how to phrase that conversation. And look, I think this conversation, I am hoping, because I know that the people that are listening to this, they are moms. They are also, I'm sure, folks that are not mothers. They are women who have chosen to stay home. There are women who have continued to work. But I do really believe that what you've hit upon is, and like through this topic, you have come across and provided really valuable ways for people who are in all spheres of that. Because when I'm reading through like the specific examples you have of like, keep your answer succinct, pick your
Mhm.
words carefully. And you said, I like to say, I get to be home with my kids. And literally, when I was reading this, and I'm like, oh, I get to be home with my kids. And you would have started with, right now, I am home with my kids. I just think like, it is so much in our framing. It's so much of our overthinking. You've hit on overthinking already. And it's, I don't know, being in that room. So I do think one of the big questions, and I also really want to talk about when you discuss if someone chooses to do the power pause, the financial conversations that you can have and what that looks like. But in terms of taking the pause, what do you think women should really be thinking about if they're on the verge of making that decision, if they're trying to make the decision? What are the key things that you've learned that you think are really important?
Yeah, I think 3 pieces, right? One is I want you to take this sense that you are giving up on your ambition and your feminism and put it away, right? I think that that is one of the things that haunts women when they're making a career shift, especially if they have gained so much self-worth and experience in climbing the ranks, this idea that they are somehow giving up. No, all of that incredible experience goes with you. Like all of that, those accomplishments do not evaporate. I want you to think about this as another layer of non-traditional experience that you're putting on top of that identity, right? Like your identity includes, you are a 10-year brand marketer, that goes with you. Now you're going to include these sort of other ways in which to explore and layer onto that. Your ambition is not defined solely by that title. It's also defined by just the determination to do things aligned with your values and have the trust that it's going to keep adding, right? We can get into feminism more, but I think the second piece is the financial piece that I think so often we assume, by the way, that stay-at-home motherhood or career pauses are a luxury. I want to dispel the idea that one side, whether you're working or stay at home, is a luxury, right? Because when we associate one side with that word, we deem it less worthy of support and we deem it less worthy of value. And, I think one of the fears that when women pause, they're like, am I giving up on my financial independence? And it is a risk, right? And I think it's really important that women or men who are preparing for that pause spend at least 6 months preparing with their partner ahead of time. And so they're having conversations at that point about what do we want or need for this chapter in our life. And it's at that juncture, as you're thinking about household income out, the values of your home and budgeting for that, and you're trying to figure out the math, that you also decide that if someone is pausing or shifting to provide care work in the home, the partner working out of the home is dependent on that partner too, right? It's at that moment you decide we are an interdependent household. The partner working out of the home who can single task. I always use the example of my husband was building a tech company. He could not have gotten on that flight to San Francisco at the drop of a hat if there wasn't a security net at home that allowed him to do that, right? But I think having that conversation to establish that mutual respect for contribution and interdependence is so key, because without that, you're entering into a risky, vulnerable situation. And we can certainly, and of course, I talk about it in the book, all the different pieces of that. And then the last part, which I failed at, but I highly encourage other people to not fail at, resigning, resigning gracefully, right? It's not to say that I
Oh,
had like a tantrum.
yeah.
I did not.
Do you mean from your job?
Yes.
And I just want to sprinkle in here that one of the things that I highlighted and was like, I've got to talk about this is you said nailing your dismount. You called it
Mhm.
nailing, right? Like how to nail your dismount. That's what you're talking about, right? The leaving of the thing.
Yes.
Explain.
Yeah, so I feel like when you're preparing, right, you sort of mentally wrapped your head around this is a chapter. You financially planned whether it was a financial no-brainer or not. You feel safe and protected. Then you go to resign, and the ideal resignation is what I call in the loop, or not, I call organizational behaviors call in the loop resignation, right? Which is you're keeping your manager in the loop, you're preparing with them. I think this is also a great idea for women who aren't necessarily committed to fully pausing to consider this is the moment where you are working with your manager and saying, I really am I trying to optimize for less stress or more time with my child? And maybe that means I'm going to consider what are my other options? Is it going part-time? Is it mapping my work day to the school day, right? This is where you and your manager might be able to explore other options besides the full pause, because there are other options available. And I think it's important for you or anyone who's listening who's considering a shift to consider all those options, because if you do love your job, there are ways in which to talk to mentors, to talk to other people outside of your particular employer and see what else might be available to you. If you still want to pause, then the in the loop model would be keeping your manager and anyone else related to the decision abreast, so that it's not like I'm dropping in and saying I'm giving you my 2 weeks. They're sort of bought into the process, and then you're essentially networking on your way out, because what that meaning you're having coffees with everyone from the executive assistant that you loved to someone in another department that you really enjoyed getting to know.
God,
They
I failed so bad. I know. Like,
yeah,
keep going.
yeah, because they are your bridge back, right? They are the way in which, if you choose to return, to that particular industry, then you're essentially able to stay, use those warm connections. And I think in another way, it also dignifies the time you've spent there, right? It sort of acknowledges that you've built this incredible network of relationships that belong to you. They don't belong to, Google. If you're leaving Google, they belong to you.
Right. And they're no one else's. It's just, yeah, that just really hit home because I was like, I did not land my dismount. And um, I don't know. I just think there are so many, there's such a perception because no one really talks about this or has ventured into this space that you're either working or you're not, and you're dedicated or you're not. And I do think one question, I had a friend, Alexis, who knows I'm talking to you, and she was saying, I do think that it depends what the industry is, because she said she has seen examples of women who leave to take the pause and then come back, and they can come back, but they're in a lesser role.
Mm.
And it might be industry to industry. I don't know. But I think that's really valuable advice that you just shared about exit meetings or just relationship growing meetings before you're doing the thing. Yeah. What do you think about that in terms of industry? Do you think that there are ways to sort of combat that?
Yes, I think it is. I think she is 100% right. It is industry specific. And I think knowing your industry and the nuances of your industry are important, right? Like we have um, have Chanu Richardson in the book as an example. She was a lawyer. Her
Mhm.
recommendation is keep your bar up. Like it does not matter. Keep your bar up to preserve optionality, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then there's, I would say finance. Someone from finance might say, try to get a 2 day a week, try and negotiate the 2 day a week work week before you fully exit. Right. And or stay, because that is an option, right? Like there was a woman I met in Dallas at HSBC, and the way she got that 2 day a week work week was she called a friend who had a friend at JP Morgan who had negotiated a 2 day work week, and she took that template and she put it in front of her manager. And so, it's not to say don't absolutely not, like you should never pause in finance. It's to say that there are certain industries that are more impacted than others. What's interesting is I always thought medicine was historically very challenging, like physicians. I was down in Charlottesville, Virginia, and there was a woman who worked at the hospital down in Richmond, and she said at the beginning of the year they will ask you what percent effort do you want to be operating at. Now that's a terrible phrasing, but she said I want to be at 50% effort. Like that's how it's called, like T. Um, and so I think knowing the nuances of your industry is really important. I think historically industries that allow for freelance and consultative work and part-time work, whether that be marketing or operations, project management, creative industries, I think those are interestingly much easier because, and this is the other part of it in response to your friend Alexis, a lot of it relies on, well, how can you stay strategically connected just enough to build your portfolio of work while
Mhm.
you pause, such that when you're returning, you very clearly have ways in which you've stayed relevant and connected to the industry. And
And
that's
yeah, you haven't completely lost. It's not, it is easy for someone to see, oh, this person has kept up, or it's not that big of a move to see that person. It's funny too, because I think probably part of just leaning into this is leaving your ego at the door a little bit. And what I mean by that, in my own experience, when I think back, sometimes people can't help themselves in the words that they use, and it's traditional, and you just have to not let it get, not let it bother you. Because I do remember times where like maybe my shift was being changed, and it was like, well, we thought that you were having kids and you wouldn't want to travel back and forth all this. And it didn't matter that they didn't realize that like the part that I love the most is like being on the ground and the interactions and traveling. But it's sort of like, sometimes people are not going to just say things in the kindest or most above board way. And that can really get to you. Like, I remember that being like, what? Like, and then that enhances the narrative of you're either this working mom and you're all in, or you're not, right?
Mhm.
And I think like, so this makes me think about that too a lot, but I love the example of thinking about if you're on the verge of that, a 2-day work week, or that example you just gave of staying in the loop. I think that's great. And I also love the part in your book talking about for during a pause, the mom connections
Mm.
and just about the importance of that. What did you learn when you really went there and really started looking at just the relationships and what that means?
Well, I think what you're starting to get to, which I think is the other thing I would, it's a nice segue from where we were, is there's still so much opportunity once you're in a pause. And I think the thing that has gotten terrible publicity is that your interests are going to die in motherhood, that your goals are going to die in motherhood, and that your network's going to die. And actually, there is a way to, from a tactical perspective, a strategic way of mitigating the risk to your next career or returning, but also in a very deep and profound way to have, now that you've checked the ego in the door, to open yourself up to new opportunities and experiences. So I'll use my own example, right? When you step in to a career pause and you have been on a trajectory for so long, you are going to feel lost for a second. You're going to feel like, wait a second, someone told me what success looked like before. And that was what I needed to get done to get that salary bump or the promotion. And suddenly no one's giving me that. And so the next best thing is, well, I guess my success is my kids' behavior. And like we all know that's a terrible, terrible recipe.
I was like, oh no.
You can hear my like
My
dog
kids are
crying at
wonderful,
my
but
door and my child yelling outside. And so you have to, move through that and then think, well, maybe now that I've checked my ego at the door, I can come up with my truest metrics of success. And that could be, and I always say, like, I obviously have a lot of examples in the book and guidance, but if you do nothing, if you don't get the book, write in great detail what your ideal day is going to be in 5 years. Who are you spending time with? How do you feel in your body? How do you feel in your mind? What are you working on? Because it's going to reveal to you what your truest goals are. And then you can have 3 buckets: professional, personal, and family goals, right? And professional could be meet a mom friend in a different industry every month, right? And that's what I did for a period because motherhood, like, as once you've gotten past those goals, you start thinking, well, where do I find those small, like measurable metrics of success that move me forward? It's really available to you, right? Like that professional exploration, that
Mhm.
personal exploration, it can happen on the playgrounds. It can happen on play spaces. It starts with like, oh, I love your diaper bag, or I love your, what pediatrician do you see? And the next thing you're like, oh, I love that role. I love that idea you're tinkering on. And I use this example of this woman, Priscilla de Muizan in California, who ended up meeting a friend of hers, a mom friend, every week in the backyard for burrito backyard sessions. And they would be sounding boards for each other every Wednesday afternoon to work through their career or to get clarity together. Or
Wow.
this other woman, Jacqueline, who, was sitting on the soccer sidelines and she had been a teacher, and the mother who was standing next to her was talking about a nonprofit she was starting. And Jacqueline said, like, I can volunteer for that. I could help out with that. And so it's actually this incredible way in which to start to, once you have sort of intentional goals, whether they be really small, like my personal goal was heal reactivity. That is not a small goal, but like it could be small, like have a silly household. I'm going to have a dance party every Monday. Or if it's professional, it could be I just stay open to other opportunities that are coming up, or when you're ready to return to work, those mom friends are actually some of your like best network to lean on to return to.
That's great. You're right. And there are so many where we are right now, it's sort of like I'm seeing a lot of my mom friends who are and have kids in the middle school and high school. And it's like a lot of them are thinking or have been sort of planning if they're not working full time on, what is the next thing? Now I'll have time to do that. Or maybe they are full time, but they're thinking about, okay, does this really still light me up? I wanted to just say one thing that I have found is I do think when I was mentioning about wanting to take like just 8 weeks of maternity leave with my son, right away when I came back, one of my first, they said, "Hey, would you come back early?" I was going to take 12 weeks. And they said, "Would you come back early at 10 weeks? Because we have the Indy 500 is an event that I had covered." And they said, "We would love for you to do it. And then we'll let you have the remaining time and then come back to your studio job." And I was kind of nervous at first, but I knew I loved covering that event. And after I talked to other moms who had done it, who were working it and kind of got the lay of the land on how to do it, I was nervous about leaving my son for the first time because I just didn't know how I was going to feel. I was just so in love with this new baby. And anyway, I really discovered about myself that, whoa, when I'm in the thing and I'm traveling to this live event, it exposed to me a different side of maybe what I had done for a living that I realized, oh, this is the part of it that really drives me. Like it's being on the ground, having the rapport, the conversations with the people that are playing the game or racing in the race, whatever. It really highlighted for me. I love doing a studio job, but like this, I
Mm.
left, I got there, I was pumping in a trailer, you know what I mean? Like I'm doing all the things, but I was like, I'm okay. And this is so exciting. And so in my experience, I try to listen to that a lot. Like and I find that if I'm on the road for a sporting event, sometimes it's really hard to leave. Like when I'm going out the door, I'm like, oh, and sometimes it'll hit harder than others. But I'm always knowing that usually that when I get there, it's like, okay, you're in it. And for me, that's something that even if it ends up that I'm doing it with however much time in between, that now is like, oh, that's the thing that it's worth it for me to miss the time, right? I don't know how much that makes sense, but I just think that's also a tool is to really understand what you would spend time away from your family for?
Well, that is actually so, we've talked a little bit about how you can feel intentional during a time away, like really make because goals dignify time. But the other piece of this is like what you're describing, you can do whether you're working in the home or out of the home, existing in between, is that like serious self study because of like what does light you up. Because I think that that's one of the gifts of when you slow down a little bit, whether you're on, whether it's like a weekend or, 2 years, you can actually like start to tune into, well, if I'm not doing this other thing that I was always doing, well, what else is there? And I think about this woman down in North Carolina who had like a Google Doc. She had an iPhone Notes app open, and she would just write down bullets of like things that sparked her interest or conversation podcasts she would listen to that like made her like research more, or things she just felt proud of, like things she felt happy in and flow, like what you're describing. And she wrote down one of those bullets happened to be she had reorganized her son's bus route because he wasn't getting picked up. And like she like felt really fulfilled. She felt like really proud that she'd managed to do this. It was just a small thing and kind of got buried in the list. And then when she was looking to return, and I always say, like, when you're looking to return, start planning like a year ahead of time as soon as you feel that little
Yeah.
nudge. But she looks back at the list, and that bullet that seemed so random jumped out to her. And what it did was it revealed to her, like, oh, I'm really interested in project management. Like, I felt in flow seeing that project end to end. And that kind of thing, like you describing paying attention to, I love being out in the field. That feels worth it to me. And I think, in our research, I commissioned a survey called the American Mothers on Pause survey with 1,200 at home parents and 1,000 members of the general population. Mothers returning to work, they rank flexibility, then stress, more headspace, and then more meaning. Like
Mm,
top 3, and I think it's because our bar is so high. So I think if we have this ability during this time to really not only move ourselves forward in sort of those deep goals that we maybe had like put on the shelf and like those small ways that we hadn't grown for a long time, but then also meet women we may have never gotten a chance to meet with, and then explore in small ways things that light us up so that when and if we're returning in a way that feels really meaningful.
yeah, I love that. And I also when you said that about loss, I actually had a therapist say that. And he said, you realize that when you change something, that there is actually a grief period that, and I was like, that's so interesting. But I think that's also obviously is what you've said, that things can be so tied to self-worth. And that also makes me think about, like your upbringing. You think about, I'm just genuinely curious too, after like doing some work on this myself, like how the way that I was raised, I had an extremely loving family. And my mom's was a teacher, and my father was a journalist. But just how does the way that you were raised and what you saw impact you? And it's funny because my mom she always worked, except for she took 2 years off, when she tells me all the time that I guilted her out and she took 2 years off. But my mom also always felt like she was just super present with me. Like I didn't know any different. And she was also always doing these things like making these big Halloween decorations and putting them, on the front steps and doing scavenger hunts with us. And so I think, I don't know, there's a lot to unpack also, I think, in the way that you're raised, what you saw, and really as much as possible kind of pushing that away and just like thinking about truly what you've said, like what is it in your heart that makes you, what is your balance? What do you need? What do you want? um I do want to ask you about the financial part of this, because I just found that I think you had so many really great points about how to plan and how to have the right conversations that are very important to have if you're choosing or considering having a pause. And frankly, I think that they're really beneficial even if you're not. Can you expand a little bit on that? And I love how you shared your experience with like your own date nights and that whole
Mhm.
structure.
We as a culture like shy away from money. It feels like one of those icky topics, right? But when we actually open it up between ourselves, and my husband really taught me to do this because I did not love Google spreadsheet or Excel. I mean, that was just wasn't my love language. And I'm not going to our like annual meetings are, they're not romantic. I would never say spreadsheets are romantic, but I will tell you that we have instituted this practice, and I talk about it in the book and share sort of templates to do this. But a
Do
meeting,
you think it's your husband's love language, spreadsheets?
I think his love language is planning together.
Okay. I think my husband's might be spreadsheets, but keep
Yeah,
going.
I
Okay.
think he really loves to see our life laid out in a way that makes sense and to know that we're both bought in. And I think his love
I love
language is
that.
time. He really loves time, and forcing me to sit next to him and look at that spreadsheet is time, right? And in the beginning, it did feel like forcing. And we did it, to his credit, even before we had kids. And I think, what that allowed us to do right away, as soon as we got married, was to think of ourselves as an organization, right? Like an organization that was joint, and it was a household, and we were going to run it in a way that we treat our businesses and our with so much respect. We were going to do that at home. And so to this day, we still have
Love
like a
that.
January meeting, and basically we will look at, this is the income in, and then these are sort of the budget categories that we have spent against in the year past. Where do we want to dial up? Can we dial down? And it's a way in which to talk about your values, really, right? So I'll use the example of last year. We might say community is really important to us, and cultivating that and investing in that. So we're going to invest in two big like parties, like a summer party and a Friendsgiving. And that takes money, right? Like that money has to come from somewhere. So we're going to dial down on travel. Like that's where we're going to take it from, right? So you can see that's like a somewhat frivolous example, but it is a way in which we're moving things around against our values. And so when you're talking about it in the context of budgeting for a one partner to be at home or in a downshifted career, you're doing something similar where you're saying, where's the money going to come from? And you're doing it together because it's an investment in the whole household, right? And the other partner is going to, it goes in with the mindset of the other partner is dependent on that other partner, right? You're going in with that. So the money isn't going to come from like your pool over here, and now you're going to be cutting your own hair in the corner, right? Like that isn't going to happen. What's going to happen is, we use the example of, there's a woman or a family who moved from the Bay Area to Virginia Beach, right? Because they realized it was worth it to them, and it was going to take a big lifestyle change. Like the cost of living in the Bay was obviously very different than Virginia. For another couple in Denver, it was just moving money off of travel and dining out, right? So you're moving things together to allow for it. You're saying, let's come back every year and reevaluate how this is going. If the change feels particularly uncomfortable, maybe you're taking it in 3-month increments. If, by the way, you say like there's actually not consensus. And so maybe we're going to revisit this and keep revisiting it until there is consensus, or maybe we find other ways to have time with the kids or optimize for less stress in the home. And I do recommend, if one partner has to pause or needs to pause because of a family relocation or special need, or because they just want to, putting into place a postnuptial agreement is so helpful. I think we dignify the work we do with other organizations with contracts all the time. It is a contract to help you feel safe and secure so you can really focus on what this chapter is all about.
So what is that? Is it an actual contract?
A post-nup, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and we have a guide to do it on the site that we did in collaboration with Fair Play, Eve Rodsky's work around valuing unpaid labor, and it is a way in which to essentially talk about if things were to go south, how in a legally binding way would the other partner's finances be protected.
Awesome. Wow.
And
Okay.
I know that people feel a lot of stigma around that. That is,
Mhm.
so there are other alternatives, but it is a really important way in which to get ahead of some of those plans.
I love that. How do you kick off the meetings?
Well, we try and make it fun, and I've actually trained
Yeah.
a number of financial planners, so we actually make it like a date day. So we'll like set aside, it like has space on our calendar, and we'll like do something fun. We'll do that, and then we'll do something fun, right? Like we'll go to a special restaurant. Other people talk. Ashley Feinstein, who's a great financial coach, talks about just having a money party. Like the kids go to bed, it's on the calendar. You're going to put fun music on, maybe get takeout. Like it's going to feel a little bit special. Um, Someone has done the homework beforehand to like spread it all out. And that's
Yeah.
in my situation is my husband, where you can use a third party financial planner
Yeah.
to basically show what the spending was the year prior, and sort of create the calculations on where the money's moving around.
I think that's such good advice. All right, I want to get to a couple questions that people have sent in because I know that time is very important. So Kelly asked, "What if after you take your pause, the workforce is so changed that your place is no longer there? Like your
Mhm.
role, your job, what you did was no longer there."
Yeah, that's a big one right now with AI. And so,
Oh yeah.
so it's particularly relevant. I think a couple of things. One, as much as you're able to stay connected to your network and industry in low touch ways, the better, right? So that might be going on LinkedIn once a week, and this might be your professional goal, and just literally scrolling the feed and liking and engaging with your industry's content. So you're showing that level of engagement. Oftentimes we underplay the ways in which we're still actually growing and learning while on a pause, right? Like you might be listening to a podcast on the way to pick up and like learning about developments. I actually learned more about marketing when I was outside of
Mm,
course, because I was actually keeping a pulse. Online certifications are great, whether that be masterclass or industry specific. Um, I do think though, beyond the ways of staying lightly connected, there's when we talk about ways in which to start to build back your portfolio of work to transition back to the workforce, one great stepping stone that I'm personally really excited about is this idea of other women's businesses, like female owned businesses, are more likely to hire fractional talent who have taken career breaks, right? So that's a great way in which, taking a freelance role or part time role at something that might be not quite as like large and corporate as your previous role, but offers you a way in which to start to see what the work cadence feels like in your home, but also start to flex those muscles and have a place to learn.
Okay. Also, someone said, when is it too late to come back? I'm 49. My industry is young, media ad sales, which is similar, but that's also, more of an age thing at that
Mm,
point.
mm. You know, historically, 5 years and under for a career pause, like you have for every year you've been out, the stakes change in terms of how easy it is to be able to transition back to the workforce. But I do highly recommend, if you've been gone for a while and you're in an industry that is hard to crack back into, considering a return to work coach or return to work program. Like, those are incredible ways in which to transition, to find corporations that are willing or have existing programs to help you return. So I suggest Reboot Excel. It was actually founded by a woman, Diane, who took 15 years off. She'd been at
Wow.
McKinsey previously. So they worked especially with people who've taken extended pauses, to help build back and coach on how the workplace in their particular industry has changed.
Okay, Neha, before we wrap, tell us where we can find more of this, the power pause, and what you're working towards. You've created such a powerful, program. What else? Like, what's
Do.
next? And I shouldn't say what's next because
I
obviously
know everyone loves asking what's next. I
I know.
want you to get to do the same exact thing, but in different ways, right? I won't be done until this movement is sort of like, there's no side eye, like there's no questions left. Everyone is on board with the reality that men or women who take career breaks are still growing, they're still contributing, and that they should be respected on the other side. So I will continue to do a lot of that. You will see a lot of that mindset shifting, narrative shifting on our Instagram and socials. You can follow me on Neha Ruch on Instagram, or you can come get a load of free resources, which we're constantly building, whether that be a library, whether that be mother classes for women to stay engaged with new ways to learn, our Flex Jobs board, so that women have access to those opportunities to continue to participate in the workforce on some level. You can find that all at thepowerpause.com.
I have one more question because when we chatted briefly about not liking the terms, for me, it's passion project, because I think that just sounds a little bit like it's your little thing. And what was the one you said? Um, there was something like,
Lifestyle project, little blog,
yeah, like just
Instagram thing.
in your research, how many women, or is there a number that you have observed, or a percentage of women who did one thing, took a power pause, and then really became energized by something totally different and ended up doing something totally different on the other side? Because I know that you've got the research to back it, but I do really think that that's a strength of women. And partially it's like our multitasking brains, or just whatever it is.
Yeah. Anecdotally, so we don't have the numbers. I can tell you that 90% of women keep themselves connected and while they're on pause, meaning that they're exploring something, they're cultivating new interests, new hobbies, they're volunteering. So they're dabbling in all those ways in which lend to new
Mm-hmm.
concepts coming out of that. Anecdotally, I would say, if I were our audience is essentially made up of like 50% fully on pause and 50% in what we call the gray area, where they have shifted into something they can do on their own terms. Right. And that is the really exciting piece, which is that when women are shifting back, they're trying to construct ways in which to contribute and do work of meaning in ways that work for them.
You're amazing. 3 things no one knows about you, real quick.
I'm very messy. I cannot eat a meal
I would
without.
never believe that. Are you serious?
Yeah, yeah. Little known fact. I read the ending of a show before I watch it, so that I don't feel too stressed. The world is stressful enough. You don't need, like, friends and neighbors in succession keeping you up at night, which it does if I don't read the ending. Um, and I took a year off between high school and college, and I hiked in the Himalayas, which, again,
Oh my God.
unbelievable if you look at me. I'm not a hiker. I don't know what I was thinking,
What
but
was that like?
it was great to bring this full circle. It was kind of like the first time went to a train stop to surround myself with interesting people and figure out what came next.
Wow. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. And you're doing so much good work that is just helping so many people. So
Thank you for that.
Godspeed on, the landscape ahead
I
and
can't
more
wait to
good work.
work with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I absolutely love the work Neha is doing because I just think that even being able to talk to other women about this conversation, having people talk about it in general is so important. I love the narrative and the thought of really supporting other women in the decisions that they're making, but reframing what it is. And also just the tools that come out of the decision to take that power pause. And like I mentioned before I shared the conversation, just the power in what we gain during that time potentially, I think could be really, really interesting to think about. I'm a huge believer in Neha's work, and I really encourage you guys to check out her platform, Mother Untitled, and of course, to read The Power Pause. And look, even if you're in the midst of your career and you're someone who has never even considered taking a break, just having your eyes, I think, open to this and to also like just the mental mind warp for folks when they're faced with the decision of like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? Maybe it just brings a little bit of understanding to everybody out there for these conversations. Thanks so much for joining me. I can't wait to see you back here next week. Please don't forget, follow and subscribe to Things No One Tells You. And of course, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, don't forget to leave a 5-star review because that's really what helps people get more listeners. We would love to grow this community. We are so grateful that you're a part of it. See you next time.